This water line belongs to the association now, and your dock is coming down whether you sign or not." That was Brenda Coyle, president of the Cedar Hollow Homeowners Association for 9 years running, standing on my gravel at 6 in the morning with a clipboard against her chest and a chain-link fence already half driven into the mud along my own shoreline. The property was Lot 12 on Spinnaker Bend, 4.5 acres of frontage on Glass Lake that my wife Dana and I had paid off the year before she died. Brenda had decided, somewhere in her own head, that the strip of beach between my cabin and the water was common ground. She had decided it without reading a single page of anything. What she did not know was that I had spent 31 years as a licensed land surveyor, and that the recorded plat for the entire Cedar Hollow tract had my own monument references on it, set by my own hands, with the meander line of Glass Lake drawn exactly where the deed said it sat. I knew where my line was down to the 100th of a foot. She had guessed. So let me ask you something before I tell you the rest. If someone drove fence posts into ground you had walked every morning for 11 years, ground you had a folder of recorded paper to prove was yours, would you have shouted, or would you have gone and gotten your camera and your steel tape and let them keep digging? I want you to hold your answer while I tell you how it went. My name is Walt Hendry. I was 63 that spring, a retired surveyor out of the county office, and then 20 years of private practice. And I lived alone on Spinnaker Bend with my granddaughter Mara, who was 15 and had come to live with me after her mother, my daughter, took a job overseas that did not have room in it for a teenager. Mara had Dana's stubborn chin and a habit of writing everything down, which she got from me. The cabin was cedar and river stone, built low against the slope so the lake filled the front windows. And on a clear morning, you could stand at the sink and watch the loons work the cove before the wind came up. Dana and I bought Lot 12 in the spring of 2003 with money we had saved $1 at a time. We built the dock together the next summer, and her initials were still pressed into the second piling where she had put her thumb in the wet concrete and laughed and said, "Now the lake will remember us." She died of a hard, fast cancer in the autumn of the year before all this began, and I had spent the winter learning how to be alone in a house we had built for two. Then Mara came in the spring with 2 suitcases and a duffel, 15 and furious at the whole world for rearranging itself around her, and the two of us learned how to be a household one quiet supper at a time. She was a watchful kid. She noticed things. She noticed which boards on the dock had warped and which neighbor walked the road at what hour. And she noticed, that first month, that her grandfather wrote the date at the top of a page before he wrote anything else. And she started doing it too, in a spiral notebook she kept in her room. I had spent 31 years setting iron in the ground and drawing lines that would outlive me. And the one thing surveying teaches you above all else is that memory lies and paper does not. The pin in the ground and the date on the page are the only honest witnesses a man has. Mara took to that the way some children take to music. It is the reason we won. I had a folder. I want to be plain about that from the start, because the folder is the whole story, is the whole. It was a scarred manila folder labeled in pencil, soft at the corners from handling, and inside it lived the deed, the recorded plat, the original field notes, the tax maps, and a copy of the meander survey the state had accepted in 1961. I added to it the way some men add to a woodpile, a little at a time, without drama, knowing the winter would come. Every letter from the association went in it. Every photograph, every date. When I could not sleep, I would sometimes take it down and read it through. Not because I had forgotten anything, but the way you check a fence after a storm. The first letter had come 2 years earlier. In the spring of the year, Mara arrived. It was a single page on cream paper with the Cedar Hollow crest embossed at the top. and it informed me, in the bloodless language these things always use, that my dock was in violation of community aesthetic standards, and that the shoreline within the development was to be considered a shared amenity managed by the board. I read it twice at the kitchen table while my coffee went cold. Then I drove the 11 miles to the county recorder, paid my $4, and pulled the plat I already had a copy of, just to hold the official one in my hands and confirm there had been no amendment, no recorded easement filed while I was not looking. There had not been. Glass Lake frontage on Lot 12 was deeded fee simple to the lot, to the meander line, free and clear. There was no shoreline easement. There never had been. I wrote Brenda a short letter saying so. I attached the relevant page of the plat with the lot line and the meander line both highlighted. I kept my sentences to 4, and I mailed it certified with return receipt. I kept the green card when it came back with her signature on it, because a signed receipt is proof she received the truth. And proof that she received the truth is what turns a misunderstanding into a choice. That card went in the folder. It mattered more than I knew at the time. That should have ended it. With most people it would have. Brenda Coyle, though, did not write back, and she did not read the plat. And a careful man learns to watch what people do with the truth once you have handed it to them. She did nothing with it. She filed it where she filed everything that disagreed with her, which was nowhere. Let me tell you who Brenda was. Because you need to understand, she was not stupid, only certain. She had been president of the association for 9 years and ran the place like a small duchy. She drove a white luxury SUV with a vanity plate that read her own initials, and she wore a linen blazer to walk gravel roads. And she carried a clipboard the way a sheriff carries a sidearm. I met her properly for the first time at the community mailboxes that first summer, before any of it turned hard. And she put her hand out and smiled and said, "You must be the surveyor. We're so glad to have a professional in the community. I'm sure you understand the value of standards." She said the word standards, the way some people say the word amen. I shook her hand and said, I understood the value of a deed. She kept smiling, but something went flat behind her eyes, and I think now that was the moment she decided I was going to be a problem. Her husband was Garrett Coyle, and Garrett ran a development company called Hollow Ridge Partners that had been quietly buying up the older lots on the far side of the lake. I did not know that last part yet. I would learn it the hard way, the way you learn most things that matter. The second escalation came that autumn. Mara called me from the cabin while I was at the hardware store in town, and her voice on the phone was tight in a way I did not like. "Grandpa, there's a man at the dock. He's putting a sticker on it." "What kind of sticker?" "Orange. He says it's condemned. He has a clipboard but no truck with a name on it." I told her to stay on the porch and keep the dog with her. Our dog was a blue heeler named Scout. Gray and freckled with one ear that never stood all the way up. And Scout did not love strangers and made his opinion known at volume. By the time I got home, the man was gone, and there was an orange placard zip-tied to the dock railing declaring the structure unsafe and slated for removal by order of the Cedar Hollow Board. There was no county seal on it, no inspector number, no permit reference, no statute it claimed to enforce. It was a printed sheet in a plastic sleeve, the kind you could run off on any home printer. And the zip tie was the cheap kind that yellows in the sun. I photographed it from 4 angles with the date stamp showing in the corner of the frame. I photographed the dock around it so a stranger could see there was nothing unsafe about it. And then I cut it free with my knife and put it in the folder. That was incident number 1 in my own count, the first thing I formally numbered. Because that was the day I understood Brenda was not going to stop at letters. I want to be honest about the anger. It sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. And that night at the table, my hands were not quite steady. Anger, though, is not a tool you can use against a clipboard. Paper is. So I did what Donna always told me to do when I wanted to put my fist through something, which was to write the date at the top of a clean page and describe exactly what happened in flat sentences a stranger could follow. No adjectives, just times and distances and what was said. Mara sat across the table from me that night and watched me do it. The lamp between us and the dark lake out the window. And then she pulled over her own spiral notebook and started her own log. She titled it, in her careful hand, The Cedar Hollow File, and under the title she wrote the date, and under the date she wrote, "A man put a fake sticker on Grandpa's dock today." I did not tell her to. She just did. I looked at that page a long time before I went to bed. The winter was quiet. I almost let myself believe it was over. Then in March, the fake inspector came back, and this time he brought a friend. It was a Tuesday morning, cold, with frost still on the dock boards, and I heard the gate chain rattle before Scout started barking. Two men in matching polo shirts stood at my gate with a roll of orange snow fence and a post-hole digger leaned against the truck bed. One of them I recognized as the sticker man. The other had a laminated badge clipped to his belt that I could see, even from the porch at 40 feet, had been printed at home on cardstock and run through a laminator, the corners not even square. "Sir, we're here on behalf of the association to mark the amenity boundary," the sticker man said. "We'll need you to stay back from the work area." "This is my work area," I said. "You're standing on lot 12. The board has determined the shoreline is common ground." "The board can determine the moon is made of cheese. It doesn't move the line. You want to show me the recorded easement that says you can dig here? I'll carry the post-hole digger for you." "You can't, because there isn't one." The badge man looked at the sticker man. Neither of them had an answer, because there was no answer. So they did what people with no answer do, which is to start working faster. I did not raise my voice. I went inside, got my camera and my old steel tape, the cloth one Dana used to hold the dumb end of, and I came back out and started measuring while they worked, calling the offsets out loud so Mara could write them down from the porch. From the iron pin at the road corner to the first new fence post was 142 feet. The deeded setback put my line 11 feet lakeward of where they were digging. They were not even close. They were on my ground by a wide margin, every post of it, and I had it on tape and on video and called out in my own voice with the date. And I told them so in a level voice. And they kept digging anyway. That was incident number 2 and number 3, because they came back the next day and finished the fence, and a finished fence is its own separate count. Here is the thing about a man who keeps records. Every time Brenda escalated, she thought she was adding pressure. What she was actually doing was adding to my folder. By spring of the second year, I had 11 numbered incidents, each one dated, photographed, and described. Each one a small brick in a wall she could not see being built. The fourth thing was the fines, and they came in a thickening stream. They started arriving monthly, then weekly, in plain envelopes with the Cedar Hollow crest. $100 for the unapproved dock. $250 for the unapproved removal of association fencing, which is to say, for me, cutting down the snow fence they had put on my own land. $500 for what the letters called continued willful non-compliance with community standards. The numbers climbed because the letters fed on each other, each new fine citing the unpaid prior ones as evidence of how serious my non-compliance had become. By the middle of that second summer, the association ledger they mailed me, printed out like a real account statement, claimed I owed $9,400, with interest accruing. I never paid a cent of it, and I never argued a cent of it either. Not in a letter, not on the phone. I wrote the date in the corner of each notice and filed it in order, because an unlawful fine is not a debt, it is evidence. And the more of them she sent, the heavier my folder grew. You cannot lawfully fine a man for refusing to surrender land you do not own. And every one of those notices was Brenda putting that exact admission in writing, over and over, in her own association's letterhead. $9,400 in fines, and not one of them collectible. And every one of them a confession she did not know she was signing. I should tell you about the day the deputy first came, because he matters later, and because I want you to understand he was not the enemy. The story does not work if you think he was. His name was Deputy Ray Okafor, and he was maybe 35, careful and a little tired the way young officers get when they have spent 2 years driving from one neighbor dispute to the next and watching grown adults behave like children over fence lines and parking. He came on a complaint that I had been, and I am quoting the dispatch language he read me, harassing association volunteers, which meant I had stood on my own porch and filmed the fence crew on my own land. He got out of his cruiser slow and stood at my gate with his thumbs in his belt. And he looked at the chain link running across my beach, and at the dock with Dana's initials in the second piling, and at the orange placard I had saved and laid on the porch rail. And I watched him do the arithmetic that honest people do when the picture in front of them does not match the complaint in their hand. Mr. Hendry, I have to act on a filed complaint. That's the job, whether I like the complaint or not. Doesn't mean I think it's got merit, and between us, it doesn't look like it does. He nodded at the fence. That on your property? 11 feet over my line. I can show you the pin. I believe you. He pushed his hat back. Here's the trouble. Right now, it's your word and a tape measure against a board that says it's theirs. What I need from you, if you've got it, is a pattern. Dates, documents, photographs. Something a judge can hold in his hand and not let go of. You build me that. And the day this stops being a civil squabble and turns into something real, I can move on it fast. Until then, my hands are mostly tied and I hate that. But that's the truth. He paused and looked at me square. How many incidents you got logged? 11. Dated, photographed, described. Something shifted in his face, a kind of respect. 11. He nodded slowly. Get it to where it's undeniable, where any reasonable person reads the file and there's only one conclusion. Keep filing, Mr. Hendry, and the next time they come, you call me direct. He wrote his cell number on the back of a card and handed it across the gate. That conversation changed the shape of the thing for me. It turned a pile into a countdown. Ray had told me, without quite being able to say it in those words, that there was a threshold out there somewhere, a line the other side would eventually cross, and that the law would swing hard and fast my way the moment my pattern met it. The waiting stopped feeling like losing. It started feeling like loading. So I kept filing, and I kept the card in the folder with everything else. The fifth and sixth things were the customers, except I did not have customers anymore. Retired as I was, so Brenda went after the one small thing Mara had instead. And that is the stretch where the banked anger came closest to coming loose. Mara had a small thing going where she watched dogs for 2 families up the road, $10 a day, money she was saving toward a used kayak. And she kept them down by our dock where there was shade and a stretch of shallow water they could wade in. Brenda left a notice on those families' doors saying the association had received reports of an unlicensed commercial kennel operating on protected Shoreline, and that they should cease bringing animals to Lot 12, citing a fine schedule for noncompliance. Both families pulled their dogs the same week. Mara did not cry about it where I could see, but she went quiet in the way she did when something hit her. and she stopped going down to the dock in the afternoons. And I added that to my private ledger of things Brenda Coyle owed for. One of those families was an older woman named Pat Ellery, who had lived on the lake longer than Brenda had been alive. And Pat drove down to apologize to Mara in person and stood in my kitchen shaking with anger, her car still running in the drive. "She told me you were running a business out here, Walt. A kennel." I knew it was nonsense the second I read it. I've watched that child grow up this past year, watched her sit out there with those dogs like they were her own. Pat set her mug down hard enough to slop the coffee. "I'll write down whatever you need. Dates, what I saw, what that notice said. Whatever she's doing, I'll put my name to it under oath." I added Pat's offer to the folder that night, a single line with her name and the date. An affidavit from a longtime neighbor who had watched the whole thing was worth more than any photograph. And I knew it. Because a photograph shows a moment and a sworn neighbor shows a pattern. It was Pat, as it happened, who told me about Garrett. And she told me at that same kitchen table, after Mara had gone to bed. "You know why she wants your frontage, don't you?" Pat said, lowering her voice even though it was just the two of us and the dog. "Garrett's people are putting in a resort marina on the North Shore. 40 slips, a clubhouse, a fuel dock, the whole circus. The county won't permit the marina, though, unless the development controls a continuous run of shoreline for the setback math, some rule about how much frontage you have to hold per slip. Your 4.5 acres is the gap in their run. They need your beach to make their numbers work, Walt. That's what this is. That's what it always was." I sat with that a long while after Pat left. The lamp off, the lake a darker black than the sky. It reframed everything. The fines, the fake inspector, the placard, the fence. It was not pettiness, and it was not personal in the way I had thought. It was a real estate play worth millions of dollars, and my shoreline was the missing parcel that made the math close. And Brenda had simply assumed that an old widower with a dock would fold quietly before he forced her to prove a claim she could not prove. She had mistaken my calm for weakness. People do that. It is the most useful mistake an opponent can make, and I had learned long ago never to correct it out loud. The 7th incident is the one I think about most, because it is the one where they came at night. It was late June, almost a year to the day after the first letter. I woke at 2:30 to Scout barking himself hoarse at the front door and the sound of a diesel engine down by the water, idling low. Mara was already at her window when I passed her room, her phone up against the glass, filming the way I had taught her. Steady, landscape, get the faces if you can, get the plates. Do not go outside. By the time I got my boots on and got down the slope to the shore, a crew of 3 men with a small skid steer and a roll of chain link had driven posts in a line across the full width of my frontage, sealing my own dock away from my own cabin behind a fence on my own land. In the dark, with no notice and no permit and no daylight to be seen doing it. The foreman turned a flashlight on me, full in the face, so I had to put a hand up. "Property's under association control, pal. Take it up with the board in the morning. You're on lot 12. This is a recorded fee parcel. You're trespassing, and you're driving posts through survey monuments. I just dig where they tell me. You got a problem? You got it with them, not me." I did not touch him. I want you to understand that, because every part of me wanted to. Standing in my own dark yard with the lake black behind a fence that had not been there at supper. I made myself put my hands in my pockets. I made myself say, out loud and calm, the time and the date and what I was looking at, so the phone in Mara's hands at the window would have my voice on it for the record. 2:38 in the morning. A chain link fence across the whole frontage. 3 men, One skid steer, no paper, no permit, no notice. Then I walked back up to the cabin without another word, and I called the non-emergency line and gave them the address. And I called Ray's cell, which he had given me for exactly this. And I sat down at the kitchen table and started a fresh page while the engine ran on down at the water. Mara came down in her socks and sat across from me, and we wrote it together. Her version and mine. 2 witnesses, same night, same times. When they drove the posts that night, they sheared off the iron pin at the northwest corner, the original monument from the 1961 survey, the one with the state stamp on the brass cap. I found it the next morning bent flat in the churned mud where the skid steer had run over it, the cap scarred, but the stamp still readable. To anyone else, it was a piece of broken pipe. To a surveyor, it was a felony. Willful destruction of a recorded public survey monument is a crime in this state, a real one, with a statute number and a penalty schedule, because every boundary in the county depends on those marks staying where the law put them. That was the night Brenda's people stopped committing infractions and started committing a crime. Incident number 19. The one that crossed the line, cleanly, in the dark, on video, with the timestamp running. Ray came at sunrise. He walked the fence line with me in the gray light, and I showed him the sheared monument and the fresh posts and Dana's initials sealed away on the wrong side of the chain link. And I gave him the SD card with Mara's footage on it, and I watched his jaw set. "This is destruction of a survey marker," he said quietly. "That's not an HOA thing anymore. That's a county thing." He looked at the fence a long moment. "You said you've got the recorded plat, the original." "In the house, with the field notes, with the meander survey the state accepted in '61. Bring all of it Thursday. There's a county commission hearing on the Hollow Ridge Marina permit. Coyle's going to be there, asking for her continuous shoreline finding. You should be there too." He almost smiled. "Bring the folder. I want to slow down here, because Thursday is the part you came for." The commission met in the old courthouse annex, a low room with humming fluorescent lights and folding chairs, and a long table where 5 commissioners sat behind little wooden nameplates. Garrett Coyle was there, in a good gray suit with a sight rendering up on an easel, all blue water and white boats and a sun that never sets. And a young man beside him I took to be a lawyer. Brenda sat in the front row in a magenta blazer with her clipboard balanced on her knee. And when she saw me come in with Mara and Pat Ellery and a cardboard mailing tube under my arm, she leaned to the woman beside her and said, plenty loud enough to carry across the room, "That's the non-compliant owner I told you about. He's been obstructing the amenity project for 2 years. Some people just can't accept community standards." 3 voiced contempts now, in 3 rooms, and this was the 3rd and the last she would get. The chair called the Hollow Ridge Marina permit. Garrett spoke for 10 minutes about jobs and tax base and recreational lake access for the whole community, and the rendering glowed on its easel. And you could feel the room leaning toward the money the way rooms do. Then the county surveyor, a woman named Inez Ruiz, whom I had known and worked beside for 15 years, stood up to give the technical staff findings. And she said in her flat professional voice that the permit hinged on the applicant demonstrating recorded control of a continuous shoreline run sufficient for the required slip-to-frontage setback, and that there was, in the staff's review of the record, a gap in the run. Lot 12. The chair asked, looking out over his glasses, if the owner of Lot 12 was present. I stood up. I did not make a speech. I have watched men try to win these rooms with speeches and lose them every time, talking until the room stops listening. I walked to the long table, and I uncapped the tube, and I slid out the recorded plat of the Cedar Hollow tract and unrolled it flat across the surface, where 5 commissioners and the county surveyor could all see it. Then I sat down beside it. One at a time, the deed, the original field notes in my own faded hand, and the 1961 Meander survey with the state's acceptance stamp pressed into the corner. My name is Walt Hendry. I surveyed this tract 31 years ago. Those are my monuments on that plat, set by my own hands. Lot 12 is deeded fee simple to the Meander line. There is no shoreline easement, and there never has been. The frontage the applicant needs to close his math is mine. It is recorded, and it is not for sale at any price. Inez Ruiz leaned over the plat the way a surveyor does, bent at the waist, and she put one finger on the Meander line and then on the lot boundary, and traced the gap between the applicant's holdings, and then she straightened and looked up at the chair. And she said the only sentence that mattered. The staff finding is confirmed. The shoreline at Lot 12 is in private fee ownership. There is no continuous run. The setback math does not close. The room went very quiet. Garrett sat down slowly. The young lawyer started paging through his own folder, too late, looking for something that had never existed. Then I laid down one more sheet on top of the plat. It was the photograph of the sheared monument lying in the churned mud. Dated in the corner, the broken state stamp on the brass cap still legible, and beside it Mara's still frame pulled from the video, showing the 3 men and the skid steer at the fence line. The time reading 2:38 in the morning in the corner of the image. And on the night of June 22nd, I said, a crew working for this project destroyed the original section corner shown on that plat. That is a recorded public survey monument. I have it, I have the video, and I have the time it happened. Inez went pale. A destroyed recorded monument is the one thing a county surveyor cannot let pass, because every line in the county leans on those marks. She turned to the commission. If a recorded survey monument was willfully destroyed, this body cannot lawfully act on any finding touching that boundary until the sheriff's office and the state surveyor have reviewed it. I have to advise you to table this permit. Today. I did not look at Brenda. I kept my eyes on the plat, on my own lines. I heard her clipboard, though, slide off her knee and clatter on the linoleum, and nobody bent to pick it up. Here is the contrast I want you to be able to feel. In 2 years, Brenda Coyle had levied $9,400 in fines and collected exactly 0 of them. She had filed 4 complaints with the sheriff, and not one had merit. My folder held 19 numbered incidents and a document recorded 64 years before her first letter, signed and stamped and accepted by the state. Her case was loud, and it was new. Mine was quiet, and it was old. The old quiet thing won, the way it almost always does when someone bothers to keep it. The consequence fell exactly where her own scheme had aimed it. The marina permit died on the table that Thursday, because the setback math could not close without my frontage, and my frontage was never going to be theirs. Hollow Ridge Partners had already borrowed against the project, mortgaged it to the rafters the way developers do, and Garrett's continuous shoreline finding was the whole foundation of the financing. When the finding collapsed, the financing collapsed with it. The way a building comes down when you pull the footing. Within 4 months, the company that had sent 3 men to fence my beach in the dark to build 40 boat slips had filed for protection. And the north shore they had already cleared and graded sat empty behind its own chain link. The silt fence sagging, the fence now around their dirt instead of my water. I drove past it once that fall. There is a particular quiet to a graded lot that will never be built, and I will admit I sat in the truck a minute and looked at it. The monument destruction went to the county and then to the state surveyor's office, because that is where those things have to go. Brenda was not charged personally. She had been careful in the way that certain people are careful, giving her orders by phone and letting the crew hold the shovels, keeping her own hands clean of the dirt. The contractor who ran the night crew, though, pleaded out rather than face the felony count. And the association, which had authorized the work in its own recorded minutes, voted on the record, paid a settlement and a state fine that ran past $40,000 when the lawyers were done. The board that had rubber-stamped Brenda for 9 straight years voted her out at the next regular meeting by a show of hands in the same room where they had once approved her fines against me. A man named Dale Furman, who had sat silent on that board for 3 of those years, came down to my cabin the week after and stood on my porch turning his hat in his hands, would not take the step up to the door. I should have said something a long time ago, Walt. I saw the minutes. I saw the survey she never read. I knew the frontage wasn't ours, and I told myself it wasn't my fight. He looked out at the lake instead of at me. I'm sorry it took me this long to be ashamed of that. I told him shame that shows up late is still worth more than shame that never comes at all. Then I gave him a cup of coffee on the porch, because a man who finally tells the truth out loud is an ally, even a late one, and you do not turn an ally off your porch over the years he wasted. He drank it slow, and we did not say much, and that was all right. They took the fence down on a Saturday in September. The county made the association pay for the removal and for a licensed surveyor, not me, to reset the sheared monument under state supervision, with a fresh stamped brass cap exactly where the 1961 field notes said it belonged, to the 100th of a foot. I stood at the edge of my own yard and watched a younger surveyor I did not know set up his instrument and chain off the witness ties and drive that pin home with a hand maul. And I will tell you my eyes stung, because it was the same corner Dana and I had walked the first week we owned the place, before the dock, before Mara, when the whole lake was ours and the future was long, and we did not know how short her part of it would be. The young surveyor caught me watching and gave me a nod, professional to professional, and I nodded back, and that was enough. Mara was beside me when they pulled the last post out of the ground and rolled up the last of the chain link. She had her notebook under her arm, the Cedar Hollow file, full now, 2 years of dates in her careful hand, the first page still reading a man put a fake sticker on Grandpa's dock today. She looked at the open shoreline, the dock standing free again, Dana's initials in the second piling catching the low afternoon light off the water. "We can put the chairs back down by the water now," she said. "We can." She thought about it a moment, the way she did. Grandma would have liked today. She'd have liked that you wrote it all down. We carried the 2 old Adirondack chairs down to the beach that evening and set them where they had always gone, in the flat spot above the waterline, and Scout flopped between them in the warm sand with a groan. And the lake did what it has done for 10,000 years, which is not care about any of us and hold perfectly still anyway. The fence was gone. The line was exactly where it had always been. The folder went back up on the shelf by the window where I could reach it, closed but not put away, because a folder like that is never really finished. So here is the lesson, plainly, because I promised you one, and because you might be standing where I stood. If someone with a clipboard tells you they own your ground, do not argue with them on the gravel. Go to the county recorder and pull your deed and your plat and read them. Walk your boundary and find your pins, and if you cannot find them, hire a licensed surveyor to set them and record the survey. Keep a folder. Date everything, photograph everything, file everything, and never pay a fine for land you can prove is yours. When an officer tells you he needs a pattern, give him a pattern so complete a judge can hold it in one hand. The clipboard is loud and it is new. The deed is quiet and it is old. And in this country, the old recorded thing still wins, but only for the person who kept it. If you have got a story like this, a fence that went up where it had no business going, tell me about it down in the comments, because I read them and so does Mara. Subscribe if you want to ride along, because there is always another one. Next time, I will tell you about the rancher upriver, whose HOA tried to condemn a stock pond his great-grandfather dug in 1922, and what happened when they drained it before checking who owned the water. Until then, keep your folder current and keep your chairs by the lake.